Strange Shadows, a Carcash and Smith podcast.
No, as I've told you fellows before, I haven't a red cent's worth of faith in the supernatural. The speaker was Arthur Avildon, whose tales of the ghostly and macabre had been compared to Poe, Bierce and Machen. He was a master of imaginative horrors, with a command of diabolically convincing details, of monstrous cobweb suggestions that had often laid a singular spell on the minds of readers who were not ordinarily attracted or impressed by literature of that type. It was his own boast, often made, that all his effects were secured in a purely ratiocinative, even scientific manner by playing on the element of subconscious dread, the ancestral superstition latent in most human beings. But he claimed that he himself was utterly incredulous of anything occult or phantasmal, and that he had never in his life known the slightest tremor of fear concerning such things.
Greetings and welcome to Season 1, Episode 6 of Strange Shadows. I'm one of your hosts, Tim Mendes.
And I'm the other one, Rob Poyton.
And the voice you heard at the beginning was horror author Tate, reading the opening paragraph of one of the stories we're covering today, Resurrection of the Rattlesnake.
Yep, so once again we're covering two stories today because they're both quite short. And I think it's fair to say it's a little bit like last time, not Smith at his best.
No.
But still lots of interesting things in here.
Yeah.
And once you start digging, you find more and more things to talk about.
Yeah, this is it. This is what I find with a lot of Smith stuff. Like even the sort of lesser stories of Smith are better than most people's best. You know?
He didn't really do pedestrian, did he? You know.
No, he didn't.
It's dialed down. Certainly the first one is dialed down.
Yeah.
Similar to the Phantasms of the Fire last time. But,
yeah, and I wonder if, because we mentioned Ramsey Campbell in the introduction said that, wondered if that was a conscious thing to actually get in Weird Tales after having, like, especially Night in Malnion, being sent back so many damn times by Farnsworth Wright saying, no, it's still too out there.
It's still too weird for a weird fiction magazine.
Yeah, I don't get that. I really don't understand that.
Well, I suppose people talk about things being dumbed down these days, but maybe that's just always been the way it is. Perhaps
Yeah, I suppose it's that lowest common denominator thing, isn't it? It's like you notice now. Well, it's like when you watch like BBC now compared to what the BBC was like back in the 80s and whatever. Yeah. BBC was considered highbrow back then.
yeah, true, yeah.
Because ITV was your light entertainment channel.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, like I mentioned to you before, I was very surprised to find out recently that the average reading age in the UK is 9, which
is terrifying.
Which really surprised me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, do you know what? I'd love to, like some of the school kids nowadays. I don't know what they must teach them in English these days, if that's the case. But they should stick some Clark Ashton Smith in front of them and give them a dictionary and go, "How about you?"
Absolutely, should be mandatory, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So our first story is the Resurrection of the Rattlesnake.
Indeed.
And did this one got published straight away? I gather.
No, it didn't actually. Oh. No.
I'm totally wrong.
No, he actually completed it on October the 10th, 1929. But then Mrs. Sully suggested some revisions, which he then did. And once he tinkered with it and it had sat around for a bit, Farnsworth Wright accepted the story for the October 31st, 1931 edition of Weird Tales.
Right.
Yeah. So, and he was paid a handsome sum of $20.
All right, that's the same as last time, I think.
Because it was 1 cent per word.
Yeah,
it was the flat rate.
So again, not bad for the time. And I don't know. Something we need to investigate again. Maybe we'll look at that on a bonus episode. Is Smith's approach to his writing? How long did he take to write these stories?
I have actually seen in here. I'll have to dig it out for next time. But it was an exchange with August Derleth because Derleth really hammered stories out like really quickly.
Yeah.
And Smith said something like that he tended to write somewhere in the region of 1,000 to 2,000 words a day.
All right. That's not bad going, is it?
No,
It's,
yeah,
not extremely high, but it's certainly not.
no,
not
but it's
low either.
better than, you know, it's better than nothing, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
whereas
well,
Derleth was something like 5 or 6K
wow.
a day.
Yeah, but most of his was cut and paste, Necronomicon.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it?
Malspretic
It's
and
the shopping list probably took up. Yeah, no, it's interesting what you're saying about the pay on this one, because Smith says in a letter dated September the 15th to Derleth, the resurrection of the Rattlesnake will bring me $20 at Wright's uniform rate to me of 1 cent per word. I've about given up writing short stories. They tend to virtuosity, which to me at least, and artificiality, and are not very profitable otherwise. I'm specializing more and more on long shorts and novelettes.
Right.
So that's why we suddenly start seeing a lot of bigger stories.
Yeah, certainly looking through these volumes, that seems to be the case, doesn't it? We get into novelettes, and once we start getting into Satamprazeros and those kind of stories.
Yeah, once we hit the Hyperborean stuff,
yeah,
it tends to go into bigger bits.
Yeah, and that's where he really starts hitting his stride. I guess with that sort of length, he can start letting loose a little bit more.
Well, this is it, isn't it? When I first couple of short stories I did was somewhere in the region of like 3,000 words.
Yeah.
And now I don't tend to write anything under 7.
Yeah.
So it's because you just got more room to breathe and everything. It's like you tend to there's a lot more telling rather than showing in the really short ones because you've got so much to cram in.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just more worthwhile for him as an artist, I guess.
I find it harder to write a short story than a sort of short long story, if you know what I mean.
I do. I really I can't do flash fiction and things like that. No. It just no.
Oh, and speaking of which, I should mention we both have a story printed in the current issue of Lovecraftiana magazine.
Indeed, we do. Yeah, that's really cool.
Just came out yesterday, didn't it? I just got my copy, and I enjoyed your story very much. So.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, I've just got mine. I haven't read it yet. So, yeah, no, it's safe to say with Resurrection of the Rattlesnake that Smith was actually quite dismissive of it, wasn't he?
Yeah, I've not been able to find. I know that Lovecraft mentioned that he liked the ending, but I've not been able to find anything in the letters.
No, he has this. He sent a letter to August Derleth on 29th of August 31.
Right.
And it says, glad to know that Rattlesnake will appear this month. Wright hadn't mentioned it to me. There isn't much to it, though, other than a trick ending, which may give some of the readers a shiver. Rattlesnakes are said to be very common around here this season, but I haven't encountered any myself.
Right.
Yeah, it's another one, a bit like Phantasms, I guess, that he's just...
Yeah, $20.
Exactly. I mean, you've got to make a living, haven't you? It's just...
Yes, quite, yeah. But I think the interesting thing with this, I don't know if this is the first occasion we see this, but in effect we've got the appearance of Lovecraft in this story, or certainly someone who seems to be very strongly based on Lovecraft.
It's interesting you say that because I wanted to. I was going to suggest to you an episode for Innsmouth Book Club podcast, the deaths of H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, that's a good one.
All the different stories he's been killed off in.
Yeah.
Because to my mind, there's loads. Because obviously you've got the Space Eaters, Frank Belknap Long. You've got obviously the Shambler from the Stars.
Yeah, Block. Yeah,
and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
that'll make a nice episode.
Yeah.
And the Lovecraft character in this is named Arthur Avleton. And well, as we heard in the reading there, he's a writer of the weird and the supernatural. I like this monstrous cobweb suggestions.
Yeah.
In his beliefs, he's strictly scientific. And, shall we choose our word? Because here it is. Here. Are you going to try and pronounce it, or am I?
Which one are you going for?
I was going for ratiocinative.
Yes, same. Yeah, ratiocinative.
Although there was one other word later on that I had to look up as well. But ratiocinative basically means
logical, doesn't it?
Yeah, based on exact thinking. Yeah.
Logical, rational thinking kind of thing. Yeah.
And just quickly, the other word was creel, C-R-E-E-L. I looked up as well, which I kind of guessed what it was, but it's actually the wicker basket used by fishermen to put fish in. Creel. Yeah, there's a nice ring to it. Creel.
Fisherman's creel. Yeah, I knew that one. Yeah, you tend to get up in Scotland a lot.
So we have Mr. Alverton, who writes these blood-curdling stories, yet is a complete rationalist. And a very nice description of these chaps. We're in chap territory here, are we? and pipes. And, yeah.
Oh, we are, aren't we? It's just tweed. Yeah, tweed, pipes, slippers. Oh, yeah.
And we have chatting to him John Godfrey, a young landscape painter, and Emile Schuler, a rich dilettante who played in alternation with literature and music, but was not serious in his attentions to either. I'm just wondering if these were ciphers for other friends or something like that.
Very possibly, yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, they all did that, didn't they, that lot? Yeah.
And we're at Avilton's house on Sutter Street in San Francisco. The word Sutter, or the name Sutter, stood out for me because I immediately thought Sutter Kane.
Sutter Kane, yeah. Do read Sutter Kane. Yeah.
And it is an actual street in San Francisco.
Oh, is it? Right.
Yeah, nothing particularly extraordinary about it as far as I can gather. These days it's got a lot of sort of tailors and clothes shops there. I wondered if maybe Fritz Leiber lived there for a while or something, but I've not been able to find any other reference.
Well, Leiber did live in a lot of different places, didn't he, around San Francisco, especially when he was in his drinking days.
Yes. So the writer is described as normal and non-eccentric, as normal and non-eccentric as his handwriting, which is a nice touch. He might have been a lawyer or a doctor or a chemist, rather than a concocter of bizarre fiction. And his room sort of matches this. It's luxurious in a sober, gentlemanly sort of fashion. The only unusual notes are the two heavy brass candlesticks on the table, wrought in the form of rearing serpents, and a stuffed rattlesnake on one of the bookcases. Nice.
I love it. Taxidermy. You know, no chap's study should be without taxidermy of some sort.
And this is where we get into the meat of the story, because Avilton is talking about... I thought this was nice. Avilton is telling them about a story he's writing called The Resurrection of the Rattlesnake. So we're in sort of metafiction territory here. The name of the story is the name of the story.
Yeah.
And basically this idea is about this stuffed serpent that suddenly comes to life. And I think this is where we get a mention of Bierce early on, don't we? And you're saying there's like a sort of direct connection here?
Yes, there is. Ambrose Bierce wrote a story called The Man and the Snake, which was released in the San Francisco Examiner in June of 1890. It's basically about a man who's gone to visit a friend and he's relaxing on a sofa and he hears a hissing and sort of looks around and there's a snake in the room. Now, the house that belongs to a friend of his, Dr. During, who collects reptiles and kept them in a wing of the house known as the snakery, which I think is brilliant. So naturally, he thinks this snake's escaped and thinks, right, what should I do? Should I go and get him or should I try and corner it? Should I try and catch it? Whatever. And as he's trying to do this, he locks eyes with the snake and then he feels a blow to his chest and face. And then it cuts to later. And later, During comes to the room to see his friend and finds him dead on the floor of an apparent seizure. And now the only other strange thing is that next to his body is a stuffed toy snake.
Wow. Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So we've got that same kind of idea of a stuffed animal or a toy animal having some sort of life. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really creepy little tale. I really enjoyed it. I hadn't actually read it until this morning when I was doing research for this. I thought, I've got it. It's in it's in that Bierce collection I've got. So, yeah.
And there was this mention in there of him sort of when he looks into the snake's eyes being transported to this strange landscape. And the snake has the eyes of his dead mother or something. It was very, very odd. Very odd. We'll see if we can get a link up as well, because Christopher Lee did a reading of this for the BBC.
Oh, right.
BBC Radio 2. It was in 2004, I think. I'm not sure what the name of the series was, presumably it was a collection of weird stories
Right.
or something.
Excellent.
But
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find a link for that. So Alverton explains the outline of this story and says, "Oh, pop over next week. We're having a party. Got some young friends coming over."
Oh,
And I like this little touch as well. Come over and we'll raise the roof.
Yes.
Which is very sort of 1920s. I almost thought, are they going to cut a rug? Do you think?
Nice. Have some dames over,
A little bit of Charleston.
Yeah.
Perhaps,
Ah, nice.
Get a few flappers.
Get a few
round.
flappers, yeah.
And so Godfrey and Shula leave, but on their way home, they start having a little chat.
Mm.
And they like old Alverton. There's that old, right, which is the Lovecraft thing again, because he was, even though he was...
Yeah.
I think that I saw a letter recently I read. It might have been to Smith, actually. It might have been one of those in the book. And he talks about middle age and everything else, and he's like, 31.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's like, but maybe that was middle age back then.
Well, that's it. I mean, the life expectancy wasn't that great back then, was it? So
Yeah,
I guess not.
60, yeah. Kind of thing. But they find him a little bit staid, and they think they want to give him a little bit of a jolt. Also to perhaps to shake him out of his skepticism about the supernatural kind of stuff as well.
I love this phrase when Shula hits on the inspiration. Ye gods and little ghosties. I'm going to use that like in day-to-day life, Ye gods and little ghosties. That's a great idea.
I've never heard it before.
No.
It's really good. Yeah. And so they get this prank about, well, we know he's got the stuffed rattlesnake. We know he's doing this story about the rattlesnake coming to life. Let's get a real snake in, do the old switcheroo, and see what happens. And then they start laughing like mischievous schoolboys plotting some novel deviltry. So even when we've got this sort of non-fantastic story in that sense, it's a modern urban setting, we still get these nice little phrases thrown in, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think he could write without throwing those little turns of phrase in. It's which is great because again, it's what elevates this from just any old story written by any old author. It's instantly recognisable Smith because of the language he uses.
So he gets hold of his fishing creel. He gets hold of a gopher snake, which I found out quite common on the Pacific coast. They're not small. They can grow up to 7 feet long. They're normally around 3 to 4 feet long. I mean, even 3 to 4 foot long, that's quite a big snake to me.
Yeah. I assume by their name that they eat gophers.
Well, that's a good point. I didn't find that out. I shall have to check that, They're not rattlesnakes, but when threatened, they do shake their tails. So you can get a rattle because if it's hitting vegetation or something. So I guess at some point they could be mistaken for rattlesnakes.
Right.
So that's why they use that particular type of snake, I suppose.
Oh, that makes sense.
So they turn up at the party next weekend with their snake in the fishing creel. No one seems to ask why they got a fishing basket with them, I noticed.
No,
Perhaps.
no. I like the fact that also that they managed to procure a set of rattles.
Oh, yes.
That were actually going to stick on the tail of this gopher snake, which I thought was a lovely touch.
That's attention to detail, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the other guests are there, young musicians, apparently. And Avilton is being the jovial host. And the evening goes well. A good dinner, cards, and some pre-war bourbon. That's pre-First World War, I guess. Are we in Prohibition that time, or is this pre... I'm not sure when it came in.
1920 to 1933.
Ah, right. So when this was written then, Prohibition was still a thing.
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder why that's a pre-war bourbon then. Something he had saved up.
Yeah, I was going to say, he seems like the sort of chap who would have his own stash,
Yeah, his own cellar.
Every self-respecting chap has to have his, his bottle of special stuff for special occasions,
Yeah, so they have a very pleasant evening, and after midnight, Avilton saw his guests to their chambers and sought his own. So they're staying overnight. It's a sleepover.
Yeah.
And then we get this important information that Avilton is a sound sleeper, and he boasted that even a rivet factory or brass orchestra couldn't keep him awake for 5 minutes after his head had touched the pillow. A heavy sleeper, which gives them the opportunity to carry out this prank.
I like the fact that these guys are obviously going to be pissed by this point. You can just see him creeping through the house. Like something like Laurel and Hardy or something, you know.
You think they're going, shh, and the snake is going,
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be quite a good scene. Actually, this could be quite a good adaptation, isn't it? A little short TV
Well,
thing.
I actually thought this. I'm surprised this hasn't been on like Night Gallery or
Yeah.
you know, one of them things like or Twilight
Rod
Zone or
Serling.
something, because it'd be
It has that
yeah,
feel.
it'd be perfect plot for this kind
Yeah.
of thing, wouldn't it?
So they get into the study and they take one snake out and they're going to do the switcheroo. This is where we get the description of the gopher snake, and it says it's very similar to a rattler in its markings. And we have the set of rattles, which is going to tie on with thread to the snake's tail before releasing it. I can't imagine the snake would be too happy about this. But,
Could you imagine? Stay still, you little bucker.
no snakes were harmed in the making of this story.
Yeah.
So they're creeping into the library with a flashlight, and they start getting a little bit creeped out themselves, which is always the way with these things, right?
Yeah. Well, you're creeping about and you've got a snake. And obviously it's going to be a pissed off snake, but now because you've just been tying stuff to it.
And when they shine the flashlight around to the bookcase, the stuffed rattlesnake is not there.
Yeah, I love that. Where is the damn thing anyway? Yes, they go looking around, looking on the turns on a light on a neighboring bookcase and then turns it on the floor, and he's looking around trying to find the snake, and they find it on the desk, don't they?
Yes. Coiled on a pile of paper, and it slowly raises its arrow-shaped head, darted forth its forky tongue, its cold, unwinking eyes with a fixation of baleful intensity, well-nigh hypnotic, were upon the intruders.
Nice.
And as they stared in unbelieving horror, they heard the faint rattling of its tail. And now, this phrase had me cracking up. I don't know if you... I'm sure you would have picked up on this.
Yeah.
Like withered seeds in a winged-swung pod. Now that brings an image to my mind that I don't really want to dwell on.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, exactly.
Withered seeds in a wind-swung pod. He must have known what he was writing.
Yeah, he must have known. That's got to be a double entendre. It's got to be.
So it appears that the stuffed rattlesnake has come alive. Godfrey drops the flashlight, and then we get one of those sort of typical scenes in this thing. It all goes dark. There's a lot of thrashing about and kerfuffle.
Yeah.
And the rattling sound is still going as well. So they bolt for the door. Shula manages to get out, and he hears behind him the crash of his companion's fall, mingled with a cry of such infinite terror, such atrocious agony, that his brain and his very marrow were turned to ice. And Shula kind of loses a bit of... He fails the sand roll here, I think, a bit, doesn't he?
Yes, he does, yeah. He retained no faculty except that of locomotion. Awesome. So he's basically running around in blind panic, which, to be fair, you know, an undead rattlesnake is gonna put the willies up your innit.
Well, yeah, there is that. But this is a bit like the training shoes and the lion joke again, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
I don't have to outrun the lion, I just outrun you. It's like he's left his mate there. And, you know,
Yeah.
Women and children and me first.
Yes.
And despite Avilton's boast of, a bomb could go off and he wouldn't wake up, this is sufficient to wake him up. And he appears dressed in pyjamas.
Excellent.
So Shula explains, the snake has come alive, something's happened to Godfrey. And Avilton sort of says, well, what do you mean? You mean my stuffed rattler? And, says it isn't stuffed. The damn thing is alive. It came crawling after us, rattling under our very feet. And Avilton, of course, is very sceptical. Perhaps he thinks already, right, there's some sort of wind-up or prank going on here.
Yeah.
He knows the snake is definitely dead. This is a nice little touch as well.
Mm.
I killed that snake 4 years ago in El Dorado County and had it stuffed by an expert taxidermist. So
yeah,
he goes around killing snakes.
Yeah. It's probably one of those small towns, wasn't a lot to do on a Friday night, you know.
Down in El Dorado.
Yeah. Hunting rattlesnakes. Yeah.
And this, I suppose, is where we get another parallel with the beer story.
Yeah.
Because Godfrey's dead, and they put it down to shock and heart failure, even though his face was stamped as with some awful brand or acid, an expression of fear and suffering beyond all human capacity to endure.
Mm.
The lidless horror of his dead staring. That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lovely line.
And he's got something clutched into his right hand, his dying grasp. And when they open them, we get the final twist in the story. What they find inside is a bunch of rattles, and on the endmost one, where it had evidently been torn from the viper's tail, there clung several shreds of raw and bloody flesh.
Nice. Yeah. That's a nice way to end, isn't it?
So what do we think here? Is this the actual stuffed rattlesnake coming to life? Is this the was the gopher snake actually really a rattlesnake? Perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think it's an undead zombie rattlesnake personally, just because it's a very cool idea. You know, but yeah, it could have been. Surely they would have noticed when they were tying the scales on it.
Yes, yeah, it already had rattles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the stuffed one was missing, wasn't it? It wasn't on the bookcase. It was actually back on the desk, over on the desk.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's more to this Alverton character than meets the eye. You know.
See, that's what I was thinking. I mean, you know, that's what I was thinking, because he does actually go on about necromancy earlier on, doesn't he? When he's talking about his stories, he's saying that people don't tend towards the necromancy and things like that anymore. So. I wonder if he's a dabbler.
Yeah,
you know?
And he's covering it up with this facade of being the total rationalist. Because he doesn't seem particularly surprised or shocked at this, does he? He's not going,
no.
Oh my God, you know, it's...
yeah.
Oh, right, oh, really?
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. In my study.
Yeah, that could be because he's a chap, of course.
That could be, yeah.
That's the chappish thing to do, isn't it?
Don't get ruffled. Stiff up a lip. Yeah. I just picture this guy in tweed, just encased in tweed. It's just...
But he does like to raise the roof with young musicians, so, you know, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. It was the roaring 20s and all that, wasn't it? So...
Yes. So there we are. We do know from some writings that Lovecraft enjoyed the ending. I think there was a letter from Smith to Lovecraft in January of that year. But I think it's one of those missing. It's certainly not in the collection here. Yeah. But maybe I'll see if we can find that out with a little bit more research, perhaps. I don't know how many of the letters were lost. Because, I mean, this was a regular correspondence that went on for, 14, 15 years or something? Yeah, there's a letter here. There's a little excerpt from it. A letter to Clark Asher Smith from Lovecraft, February the 2nd, 1930. Right. The resurrection of the rattlesnake is haunting. You manage to fill the atmosphere with a certain dark portentousness at the end as the end approaches, and the climax fits on very neatly, even though it is an adopted suggestion. So that was a suggestion that his girlfriend made, Mrs. Sully. Yes, who we've spoken about previously. Yeah. Excellent. So there's our first story. Let's move on to our second, shall we? Which is 13 Phantasms. Yeah, 13 Phantasms. The only existing manuscript is of a late draft called 29 Phantoms, dated October the 11th, 1929. And there's no evidence of it being submitted anywhere before its eventual publication in Julius Schwartz's fanzine, Fantasy Magazine, in March 1936. Oh, wow. So this was never in a Weird Tales or Astounding or any others? No, he never sent this anywhere. And the only reason it's called 13 Phantasms as opposed to 29 Phantasms is because he had a completed book where he wrote down the dates he completed all of his stories. He'd crossed through the 29 and replaced it with a 13. 13 sounds better, doesn't it? Yeah. 29 is a bit sort of random. It is, isn't it? Number, yeah. Plus with the story, it'd probably make the story like 6 times as long as well. Another one, and another one. Yeah, exactly. Law of diminishing returns, wouldn't it? It's a bit like the Little Britain Barbara Cartland character, isn't it? How many words is that now? Yeah. Another phantom, and another phantom. So, Oh, just one interesting thing. There is another story called 13 Phantasms, and it's also the name of a collection of short stories, and that's by an author called James Blaylock, who I'm not familiar with.
Ah, no, I'm not either.
I think he's mostly known as a steampunk author.
Oh, right, okay.
But he wrote this collection that are described as sort of charming, weird stories. And by all accounts, the 13 Phantasms tells the story of a man who's sort of pulled into a pulp magazine and goes back to the past to visit the authors of the golden age of science fiction. So that sounds like quite a nice story.
Nice.
So that might be worth checking out at some time.
Yeah, definitely. No, it sounds pretty cool, actually, yeah.
And I was wondering why he'd call his story the same as a Clark Ashton Smith story, but if this wasn't published anywhere except in a fanzine, then he probably never even knew about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the story starts with this quote, "I have been faithful to thee, Sonara, in my fashion." Now, this is from a poem by Ernest Dowson called Sonara, which incidentally is Greek for artichoke.
Nice.
Dowson was a decadent poet.
Right, that fits.
1867 to 1900, and by all accounts, he lived the decadent lifestyle. He was fully into it.
Right.
So we know certainly Smith was into his decadent poets, wasn't he?
Oh, he was, yeah.
And the poem is basically this man saying he has been faithful to Sonara, who's the great love of his life, in his own fashion, which, we can infer what that means. And certainly that's the theme that comes up in the story.
Yeah.
Because during the poem, he's telling how he spent a night with a prostitute, and although she had red lips and was wanton and everything, he couldn't get over this longing for Sonara, his one true love.
Yeah. That's the worst excuse ever, isn't it, though? I was thinking of you while I was doing it.
Yeah, that doesn't really sugarcoat the pill.
No, it doesn't really, does it? It's like, oh, thanks.
But we do get this interesting little Robert E. Howard tangent here, the third of the Holy Trinity of Weird Tales writers. Because one of the lines in this poem says, "The feast is finished, the lamps expire." Now, those of you familiar with Robert E. Howard and his life, or particularly his death, I'm sure you have heard the story. Well, the story originally was that these were the lines on his typewriter, the last things he typed before he shot himself. A more factual account, by all accounts, is these words were found on a slip of paper in his wallet, but he had typed them out. And those words were, "All fled, all done, so lift me on the pyre. The feast is over, the lamps expire."
Nice.
So a lot of people thought that poem Sonara was where he got that phrase from. But actually, people have researched into this, or scholars have certainly researched into this, and it seems much more likely that, well, these are they're actual lines from a poem called The House of Caesar, which was written by Viola Garvin, and that was published in 1926. So it's an exact lift from that poem.
Right.
But we wonder if Viola Garvin at some time had read Sonara and taken that, because it's a nice little phrase, isn't it?
It is, really is.
Yeah, the feast is over, the lamps expire. It's very evocative. And of course made all the more poignant in the context of Howard's suicide as well.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a nice little connection, if you like, between the two there.
Definitely. Did you have a favourite word for this one?
Yes, I did. Immortelles.
Same as mine.
I've never heard that word before. I've never seen it.
No.
Before.
It's interesting because it means long-lasting. It's a long-lasting flower arrangement that's placed on graves.
Right.
Obviously, you see those, but I'd never knew what they were called. But it's also the name of a Caribbean tree of the pea family.
Wow.
With a spiky trunk and clusters of red, orange, and pink flowers.
Oh, nice.
I'm assuming he means on the grave because of the context it is. But
spiky
I could
tree.
just spiky tree flying through his images, through his vision.
And the flowers being placed on graves thing, I never knew this either. Apparently that was a Welsh custom.
Was it?
And it wasn't really seen outside Wales until the mid-1800s.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think it spread into England with the growth of the big metropolitan cemeteries.
Yeah.
your Kensal Greens and your Highgates and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where people actually started having sort of gravestones, I suppose, and slabs rather than being buried 5 deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our protagonist in this story is John Alvington, which is quite similar to the name of the previous story.
Yeah, I noticed that. I had to double check when I first saw that. I was like, she used the same name.
And, well, there's the plot to this is basically a man laying dying on his bed or his chaise longue, and he sees a vision of Elspeth, his lost love, his Sonara, and that's pretty much all that happens.
Pretty much, yeah. It's basically just, it's all about regret, isn't it?
It's very Poe. I thought this one was a very much a Poe story.
Very Poe, yeah.
And we get that sense in this of as in the poem that this man is something of a philanderer. Well, many people called him a rake. It was said he had broken or materially dented the hearts of 12 women, including those of his 2 wives.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where we get our 13 from. We've got these 12 women that he's wronged, the extra one being Elspeth.
Yeah, I like this other description of him here. Others might consider him a Don Juan. So, but he knew himself for a hopeless sentimentalist if there ever had been one. That's a nice way of putting it. He was a randy bugger.
And that goes straight back to the poem, right? It was, I was with another woman, but I was being romantic because I was thinking about you all the time.
Yeah.
It's it's sort of it's denying any responsibility almost, isn't it? That kind of
Pretty much.
I can't help the way I am.
This is the classic. Oh, it's the brain in my penis, isn't it? You know,
big brain, small brain.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought another interesting thing was the description of Elspeth, which, by the way, is a Scottish name for Elizabeth, which I never knew either. She's described as elfin, almost like a sort of fairy creature.
Yeah, fairy-like, but tall.
Yeah, puckish laughter, but unexpectedly tall for so fairy-like a person. And he's never liked any but tall women as well, which,
He's a leg man, wasn't he? There you go.
And I got a little sense of Malnaon in this as well, because we get this thing of he thinks he sees her every now and again in the street, and it turns out, of course, to be someone else. So she's, in that sense, is being haunted by her, whether she's alive or not. Yeah,
it's a recurring theme we've seen, isn't it? Because this reminds me as well of The Last Incantation a little bit.
Yes.
It's that sort of like nearing the end of your life, looking back, regret, lost love.
And it's the same thing in the, I think it was on the wedding night or before the wedding eve, they had some sort of argument, and it's the same thing here. 7 months engagement, flash of temper, a want of conciliatory tactics in the crucial quarrel. Again, lovely language he uses.
Yeah.
And they part. And that sends him on a vain quest from face to illusory face the remainder of his life. So he's always trying to recapture this feeling he had.
I like this bit there. He did not and could not remember the other women, only that he had somehow dreamed for a little while that they resembled Elspeth. It's no wonder that he'd wronged them as well, is it, if he told them?
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear the other side of the story, isn't it, in these things?
It's that whole calling out the wrong person's name in bed thing, isn't it?
Yes, especially if it's her sister. Anyway, there's one little thing I want to go back to, actually, because we had the word immortelles, and this is very Poe. I love this little line just at the start. He thought briefly of embalming fluids, immortelles, coffin nails, and falling sods. That's a beautiful funereal description, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And I know we often choose band names, but the Coffin Nails were an actual psychobilly band.
They were, yes.
Very good too.
Yeah. Yeah. Falling Sods might be a decent one.
Yeah, it's possible. So he seems to be in this sort of fever state, certainly on his last legs. And someone opens the door of the room and he thinks it must be the nurse because no one else will come to see him now. And he tries to turn a little. In fact, it's a titanic effort, altogether disproportionate to the feeble movement, so he's in a very bad way.
Yeah.
But it can't be the nurse, because the nurse is dressed in white, and this woman wears a dress of cool, delectable green, pale as the green of shoaling seawater, and there's something very familiar about her. And she turns, and of course it's Elspeth, the very Elspeth from whom he had parted with a bitter farewell, and who had died without ever permitting him to see her again. So now we know that she is dead, which probably adds to his guilt and the feeling of being haunted and everything else.
Yeah.
Similar to, like say, Last Incantation as well.
I like the fact that it's that he realizes as well that the dress that this phantom figure is wearing is the dress that Elspeth was wearing on the day of their quarrel. So that's a nice touch.
So this is exactly as he remembers her from that last encounter.
Yeah.
But then another Elspeth comes in behind her, identical in every detail, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth. So we go from weird to weirder.
I wonder if because they're all wearing green dresses. I wonder if they're all wearing the same dress, or if they're wearing different things from different parts of their life together.
That's an interesting point, yeah, because it doesn't really say that the room was filled with women, all of whom wore the raiment and the semblance of his dead sweetheart.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to speculate, is he seeing just that one 13 times, or like you say there?
Yeah, if they're for pivotal points.
Yeah.
The mistakes.
Yeah.
You know.
That's nice. Yeah. But then we've got this number of 13 because he broke the hearts of these 12 women. But then, of course, if you count Elspeth as well, which he didn't seem to, then there'd be 13. And they start laughing.
That's creepy, isn't it? Because you imagine the effect of the ensemble all laughing. It would be really quite disturbing.
Yeah, because there's nothing. This isn't like jovial laughter, is it? This is almost sort of mocking laughter.
Yeah.
And he can't really even count them anymore. It's just a throng of faces, and everything grows dim and confused and indistinct, and he's not even sure which one is Elspeth, or had there ever been a real Elspeth, which is suddenly throws the whole thing into doubt. And we've got our classic unreliable narrator. Is this all just
it's an interesting twist,
yeah, is
isn't
this
it?
all just a fever dream anyway? There never really was any sort of Elspeth.
I mean, has he been deluded all his life? Has he been chasing after this imaginary ideal of woman?
Yeah, perhaps she's a composite of all the women he's known, or something like that.
Wow.
And this green seems to feature very strongly in that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a quote from Lemmy I read in his book once. It was something about when you've taken a certain substance and you've been up for 3 days, you're sitting in a room reading a book, then you suddenly realise actually you're in the street and there's no book. That sudden jolt in and out of these different realities.
Yeah.
And it just finishes him with him passing away, basically. He was not sure of anything that last when oblivion came, and he passed to that realm in which there are neither women, nor phantoms, nor love, nor numerical problems. It's nice to know there's no maths in the afterlife, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Oh God, that'd be hell, wouldn't it? An eternity of algebra. That's a nightmare, not really worth thinking about, is it?
Imagine you get to the pearly gates and the guy goes, so there's 2 trains. One leaves Stockport at 3 o'clock at 50 miles an hour. Which one gets to Runcorn first?
Yeah.
I'm going to the other place, mate.
Yeah.
So, have we got anything else on that? I think that's pretty much it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I couldn't really find out much about it because, like I say, he didn't seem to share it out or, put it anywhere. Just sort of wrote it, stuck it in his drawer and forgot about it, I think.
I wonder if it's the sort of thing he wrote as a sort of exercise or practice, or he just wrote it and he thought, well, it's not really good enough to send off anywhere. I mean, we can guess what Wright would have said. It's straight away Wright's going to go, not enough plot. Yeah, Wright wouldn't have liked it. But it's it's a dream piece, really, isn't it? Well, literally a fever dream.
Yeah, Ramsey Campbell writes in the introduction here, equally, 13 Phantasms suggests an attempt to modernize and render more prosaic a theme already addressed in his earlier tales, though perhaps the recurrence also implies it was a concept dear to his heart, dear enough that he didn't risk submitting the piece to Weird Tales, perhaps.
Oh, that's an interesting point. So was this based, we know he suffered loss in his own life, and certainly, reflective of that.
Yeah, was this just one of those private pieces? Yeah.
Yeah, almost like a form of therapy for him, or release,
Yeah.
or
Catharsis kind of thing.
That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, I did it like when I was having trouble with the council moving me flats. They'd done that thing where they go, "Oh, we're moving you next week." What? Hey, what?
Right,
You got to pack up all your stuff and get out. So I wrote the story "Insecure Tenancy." And that like the first half of that is just full of bile about the council mucking this character around. It's basically me just ranting.
Writers can do that. I must admit, I've had I can think of a couple of characters I've had in books that were very closely based on certain people.
I've been slowly working through my shit list. Killing people off.
Listen, there's worse ways to vent your spleen, right? I mean,
this is it.
We're doing it in a creative, positive way.
This is it. This is exactly it. The author PJ Blakey Novis from Red Cape Publishing were at a book fair together recently. He had a great T-shirt. He said, "Be nice to me, or I'll put you in one of my novels."
Oh, brilliant! Brilliant. Yeah. And you get asked that question. I've been asked that question before. Am I in your story? I've been asked that question. Is that supposed to be me?
No, of course not.
No.
Of course not.
But that's part of the creative process. Is this release, and we all draw on our experiences, and things we connect with on that level are going to be hopefully much more vivid in our writing. Yeah,
I agree. And obviously, like by all accounts, Smith was a bit of a ladies' man. So I wonder if, some of that is born of his own guilt,
Yes, that's true. Yes.
He could possibly have having one of those dark nights of the soul after a few whiskies or whatever. And think, oh, God, I've been a right arsehole to these women.
Yeah.
It's possible, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And you certainly mix that in with the Poe influence, which was almost always the lost love, wasn't it?
Yeah, and regret.
Yeah.
Guilt and regret. And
which is something in Lovecraft that you rarely see, if ever.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose there's very little emotional content in general, really, apart from sheer terror.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot. It is a criticism of Lovecraft's writing, and it's quite a fair criticism. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
But a lot of his characters aren't fleshed out at all. There's no real depth to them because, they're just ciphers. They're just ciphers for the reader to get they're just a medium to get the plot through, which, that's great for me because I love that because I can really sort of get into it that way.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about the characters' motivations. We don't even have to feel any strong connection with them particularly, but they're just a way for us to experience the cosmic terror.
Yeah, I can only really think of a handful of times that there was any real depth to the characters, like Charles Dexter Ward and probably Thing on the Doorstep are the two that spring to mind.
Yeah, and I suppose Randolph Carter is his main character, his only real sort of
recurring guy.
But even then,
he's basically himself.
Yeah, there's not an awful lot in there in terms of this and that. There's not even a lot of background about him. I don't think is there. It's
no
New England mystic guy kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas Howard's characters are all full of action and life and lust and bloodlust and plunder, and it's almost like three corners of a stool to me. Each one has their own particular strengths, and I enjoy each one equally.
Yes, same. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of combination of the three. I wonder how that would have turned out if that would have been a feasible thing.
Yeah, because you're right, because like Smith is the emotional part of the triad, isn't he?
Yes.
He's the sort of heart where you'd say Lovecraft was probably the head,
Yeah.
and Howard would have been the gut. You know.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of way of looking at it.
And interesting that three so different writers can collaborate in the sense that they shared a lot of ideas and themes.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so there's our two stories for today. Next time we're going to be looking at... Actually, this is a story I've not read before. And we start getting into the longer stories now with The Venus of a Zombie.
Yep, I love that name. A zombie.
A zombie. Sort of, yeah, that's like a zombie.
Yeah. Sounds like a mission in Tomb Raider or something, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? I think there's going to be artifacts involved in this, perhaps, from the sound of it.
Yeah.
So yes, we're looking forward to that one. We hope you can join us for that. Please do check out our Patreon page as well. If you sign up as a Patreon for Strange Shadows, you also become a patron of the Innsmouth Book Club, so you get access to bonus content from both shows. And in fact, we've got 2 bonus content episodes just gone up. We had our first look at the letters, didn't we, last week?
That was fun. Yeah.
Yes, between Smith and Derleth and Lovecraft. That was very interesting. We're going to be doing more of those.
Yeah.
And last Sunday, we had our first live chat from Innsmouth as well, with a few guests in.
Yeah, that was good fun as well. Yeah.
Yes, most enjoyable. So do check out the Patreon page for details of those. And just one other thing I'd like to quickly mention, Innsmouth Gold have just launched a Kickstart for our new anthology, which is going to be a new collection of sword and sorcery stories. Some of those will be Howardian, some may even be a little bit Smithian. So please do take a look at that as well. And, we do like it if we can support new authors and, well, even old, aging authors bringing out new material. I think that's something we can all get behind. Okay, so that's all for today. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time. With that, it's goodbye from me, Rob Poynton.
And it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.
You have been listening to Strange Shadows, an Innsmouth Gold production in association with the Innsmouth Book Club. For more information, visit www.innsmouthgold.com, because Innsmouth is not just a place, it's a state of mind.